Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Well, in 2016, Donald Trump scored his most unlikely victory over Hillary Clinton with great support from white people, but just 8% of blacks and 30% of Hispanics. But in a great irony and reversal of fortune, Trump now appears to be in trouble with a block of white voters, those much discussed white suburban women, while he might actually be making serious inroads among blacks and Hispanics. And in an effort to crystallize his plans for the black community, Trump has unveiled what he calls the Platinum Plan for the revitalization of majority black communities. And here to discuss what's in the plan, whether it will actually lead to an uptick in Trump's minority vote, and some disturbing attitudes of voters about the very integrity of the upcoming election, is LibertyNation.com socio-political correspondent Jeff Charles. Jeff, welcome back.
Hey, Tim, what's good? How you doing?
Pleasure to have you. So we'll get to the election integrity issue and how many voters are prone to believe the results can't be trusted. But first, you've written an excellent analysis of the Trump Platinum Plan for black communities. And by the way, I love how Trump calls it the Platinum Plan, like it's a package plan for one of his resorts. But tell us what's in the Platinum Plan, and more importantly, whether the benefits of it will really be felt by people with Democrats controlling power in all the cities that the Trump plan is aimed at.
Yeah. So the plan itself, it is a very aggressive free market type of plan. It's really designed not so much for the government to just pour a lot of money into black communities, but it's designed to give black people access to more capital. It focuses heavily on entrepreneurship. I mean, they want to have 500,000 new black-owned small businesses opening. They want to add 3 million jobs. They want to help revitalize the community using the free market, rather than just government program after government program that will help to a certain level, but prevent the black community from getting beyond that. So that's what I like about it. It also focuses on education, school choice. That's important. Also healthcare, to research health disparities between the black community and other Americans. So all these things are very important. If he's able to even accomplish some of these things, it will be a big benefit. However, it's going to be very hard for that to happen because President Trump is at the federal level. And this is yet another reason why local politics is so crucial, because any of these programs or any of the measures that he wants to implement is going to have to go through state and local governments. And the local governments in the cities that in which black people are doing the worst are run by Democrats, who have a vested interest in making sure that black people don't rise above a certain level. So it's going to be hard for the black residents to actually reap these benefits. I'm not saying that they won't have any benefits from this plan if Trump is able to implement it, but it won't reach its potential with Democrat governance in a lot of these cities who don't want it to work.
Now, does Joe Biden have any kind of plan to compete with that, or the Trump's Platinum Plan, or does you think Biden sort of believes just leave it alone? He's already going to get a high percentage of the black vote. Don't even acknowledge that such a plan was introduced.
Yeah, so former Vice President Biden does have a black agenda. It's called the Lift Every Voice and Sing. It's named after the Black National Anthem. A lot of it was heavily dependent on government funding, on government programs. There were a few things in there that I liked. I mean, if there was a little bit of a focus on entrepreneurship, not as much as Trump's plan. But what I really want to highlight here, though, is that this is the first time in recent memory that both presidential candidates have outlined a specifically black agenda in recent memory. And typically Republicans don't do this kind of thing. But Trump's plan is what I call unapologetically black. All throughout that document, it highlights the African-American community, the black community. There's no euphemisms in there. It's specifically for black people. So both candidates are actually competing for the black vote.
So, Jeff, you talked about the roadblocks that the Democrats who run all of these cities would put up in the way of Trump's Platinum Plan if he's reelected. But let's look at the other side of it. Is there any evidence that the looting and riots and destruction in so many cities run by Democrats is causing black people to rethink their commitment to the party and the sort of one party system that rules in so many of these urban centers? Or is there more a larger sense that Trump actually is what the elite media has been saying, a racist? And no matter the energy he's poured into creating more jobs than ever, or funding historically black colleges, or his opportunity zones, or criminal justice reform?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I actually think it's a little bit of both, because I think black people, I think this election season, they've already been kind of seeing that the Democrats don't really represent them. And so, but I do think that a lot of them believe a lot of what the media says about Trump. Now, I do think that there are a lot of black people who are going more towards Trump or more towards Republicans. I don't think it's in as high numbers as we would want, but I think it's still happening. But I think more are just starting to become even more fed up with the Democratic Party. But I think what's happening now is that it's starting to get worse. And when you see that the far left progressive wing taking over the party and pushing things like defund the police, despite the fact that 80% of black Americans don't want that to happen, you see that the black people are seeing even more that a lot of these white progressives don't necessarily have black people's best interests at heart, which is why, and we've talked about this before, it's why I think that a lot of black people are just going to say a pox on both your houses and stay home.
Okay, so switching gears for a second here, you wrote another piece recently on LibertyNation.com entitled Alarming American Attitudes about the 2020 election, in which you write, a recent Yahoo News YouGov survey showed that a small percentage of Americans think that the 2020 election will be free and fair. The poll taken in mid-September revealed that Americans of all political persuasions doubt the integrity of the upcoming election. Half of Trump supporters and 37% of Biden supporters agree that the election will not be free and fair. This is really shocking stuff. What's the root of this widespread fear that the election won't be free and fair?
Yeah, and you're right to use the word shocking. I mean, in 2020, there's very little that shocks me anymore. But when I saw this, I was pretty surprised. You know, I think where it's coming from is just, I think a lot of it has to do with the state of our political discourse. I mean, you saw the debate the other night. That is a representation for how political discourse is right now. And what we're seeing is both parties are already basically setting up their excuses for as to why they might lose. And none of it has to do with the fact that the election will be free and fair. So on the right, you have people saying, oh, there's going to be widespread voter fraud if we lose. And that's what the narrative will be. On the other hand, if Biden loses, they're going to say it's widespread voter suppression. And the reality is that there isn't really compelling evidence that either of these things happen on a level that would be widespread enough to impact the result of a presidential election.
Right. So you quote an expert on that subject in your story, an advisor to Vice President Pence, who certainly expressed doubts about the possibility of a rigged election. His quote was, "You're not going to see widespread fraud in a presidential or Senate or governor's race. It's just not feasible, and it hasn't been in 70 or 80 years. So should people on either side really go down this road of being fearful of a rigged election?"
No, we shouldn't. I don't think that this election will be rigged. I agree with what the advisor to Mike Pence said. I think and maybe in very rare cases, maybe with a congressional race. I mean, we saw what happened with Al Franken's race. But in general, overall, there's not really a good way to rig an election in a way that's actually going to make a difference in the outcome. Yeah, we've seen voter fraud in local, state, federal races. But there's no evidence that it could occur to the extent to which it could swing the election for Trump or for Biden.
Yes, but the perception among people is still shocking, no matter whether it's based on reality or not. So before I let you go, Jeff, here's the closing question for you. What do you think is a realistic target number for Donald Trump among Black and Hispanic voters?
Yeah, I would say for Black voters, I think the stretch goal would be 15%, but I think that'd be the very most. I think it's going to look more like between 10 and 12%, maybe. I think he is going to increase his Black support. Among Hispanics, like you said, he got 29 or 30% in 2016. he is making a concerted effort to reach Hispanic voters, and we've seen in states like Florida, a lot of them are supporting him. So I think he may even get more of a bump there. So I could see probably, 30%. I'd probably see maybe like 35 to, at the stretch goal might be 40%.
All right, Jeff, thanks once again for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.